I'm already fine. You guys don't get the tips. Stop making that face. I know it's not. I know it's not.
Get my timer out here. Come on down. Required, right? We got to take roll. Yeah. All right, everybody, we'll go ahead, I guess, and get started. My name is Clay Hardman. I work at the law firm of Gilmore and Bell. I'm in my 4th year right now, graduated from the U in 2015. And since I'm batting leadoff here, I just thought it would be helpful if you guys could help me get a little bit warmed up. And I want to ask you the question right now that you will almost certainly hear in every initial legal interview that you'll ever have, which is this. What kind of law do you want to practice? Raise your hand. I need hands. I need hands. I'm going to pick on you. Where's the hand? Criminal law. All right. So, that's kind of, litigation with a purpose, right? I've got 2 torn ligaments in my right hand, so hopefully you guys don't have answers back there. Okay, another one. Is anybody general litigation? General litigation right here? Okay, that's a Twinkie for you, bud. Just a Twinkie for you. Anybody else? How about, come on, give me the one I want. Corporate! There it is. Booyah. Oh, there it is. That's good stuff right there. That's the good stuff. Awesome. Well, guys, I love that the law school puts this on, this event, where we can kind of get a sampling of the various types of law. I don't think it existed when I was here. At least it wasn't required, and so I might not have been there. And I think in an ideal world, it really would be that you can all go out there and sort of have your own little Goldilocks experience, right? That you can get out there and try that Papa Bear bed, which is probably symbolic of general litigation. It's a little rough, kind of like sleeping on a jagged rock, but some people are into that. And then you can move on and try that Mama Bear bed, a little bit soft. You're doing the same patents every single day. And then hopefully you can move on and try that perfect Baby Bear bed, right? The perfect combination of soft and firm. It's kind of got a cooling effect going on. And that is what I'm here to talk about. That's transactional law, corporate transactional law. Though it's the Baby Bear bed, it's a little smaller. It doesn't fit everybody, but as you can see, I fit in it just fine. Anyway, I'm actually not here to talk about fairy tales. In fact, I am here to go Mythbusters on you guys. And I want to debunk 3 common myths about transactional law that are still circling around. I was here last year to talk about it, but believe it or not, Dean Dickey, these are still flying around, so I'm back again. And the first myth is that there are no good transactional law jobs in Utah. All right, I often hear from law students, well, don't I have to go out to the coast to get a really good transactional law experience? Well, the answer is no. And I think to debunk this myth, I need another lead-in question for Candy. What is transactional law? Can anyone name a non-corporate or business type of transactional law for me? Wills and estates, boom. By the way, this is Valentine's candy. I don't mean for it to be suggestive if it says like be mine or anything. I just didn't want you to think I was using the stale Christmas candy, right? It had to be fresh. That's right. So there are tons of different types of transactional law. Wills and estates, you got licensing, environmental law. There are various different types of, environmental law, patents, all sorts of different transactional law. I often think of it as non-litigation, right? So it's a broad category of a type of law that you can practice, and that there are opportunities here in Utah to go find. And while it comes in many different shapes, it also comes in very many different sizes. For Candy, does anybody know the type of transactional law that my firm, Gilmore & Bell, focuses on? I know some of you know it. Type of transactional law. Nobody knows? Where's Lauren? Lauren knows. Public finance, that's right. All right, that's pretty deep right there. Oh, nailed it. Nice catch. That's right. And so my firm is we consider ourselves a public finance boutique law firm. We've only got 10 attorneys in Salt Lake City. We've got more in the Midwest. But I think on your PDO charts, we'd be considered a small law firm. I came from a regional firm called Ballard Spahr prior to this job that has over like 600 attorneys, tons of different transactional opportunities there. And then there are other law firms that you'll talk about, Fabian Vancott. We've got some other speakers that have transactional law sections, and then some people do it solo. So there are a lot of different sizes of law firms out there in Utah that you can look at to get a transactional law experience. It's also a great experience here in Utah. I always get super excited when I get to negotiate a deal against an associate or even a partner from a big law firm on the coast, because I know that I know the deal a whole lot better than they do, because often they're just looking at very narrow issues. And here in Utah, you get to see the whole deal. And so you get really good hands-on experience here in Utah, and I would prefer to practice it here than the coast. Okay, the second myth, and this is a big one, is that transactional law is boring. You guys have never heard that before, right? Well, I came up with this last year. I'm going to use it again because I am still living the dream. DREAM being an acronym for drafting, reading, emailing, analyzing, and meeting with people, both by phone and in person. And definitely at the front of that list is drafting. And I love drafting because it's a very active, engaging task. It's really hard to fall asleep when you're clunking away at a keyboard, right? But where you might fall asleep is going through boxes and boxes of doc review emails. And even worse, I don't know if any of you have been in a 6-hour deposition with an in-house accountant, but it taught me that litigators must have a really high tolerance for lead poisoning, because I was in there literally stabbing myself in the thigh with a pencil for the whole 6 hours to try to stay awake. And worst of all, legal research, right? Legal research is just not a part of what I do very much. And so the next question for Candy is, how many times did I log into Westlaw or LexisNexis over the past 12 months? Anybody venture a guess? Zero is wrong, but it's close enough. I'll give you some snowballs because it was close enough. I actually logged in twice. I logged in one time because I had to find a state statute and the state's website was down, so I had to go there. And then I logged in again this morning so that no one asserts that I commit malpractice by not logging in to Westlaw. And so it's not a big part of what I do. The other part that's exciting about transactional law is you get to build exciting stuff, right? The best example is what you're sitting in right now. My law firm was involved in the financing of this law school. I work on charter schools, building affordable housing, and all sorts of projects that you can drive around and see. I brought an example of one of my projects. I'm not going to throw this because it's a brick. But this is a company in Reno, Nevada that we helped finance for a facility that takes garbage, crushes it down into these little particles, and then uses a processing facility to turn this into jet fuel. So it's like you are doing some innovative, crazy, awesome projects, which I love to be a part of. And the other part that I like about transactional law, and you probably will hear this, and it's true, is it's a lot more collaborative than adversarial. The transactional law attorney's motto is, I am not going to be the reason why this deal doesn't get done. Everybody's working together, everybody's trying to get the project done, and there's not a whole lot of white elephants in the room and awkwardness and fighting. So that I definitely like a lot about the practice. So the third myth is you have to be a nerd with a business background to practice transactional law. There's a huge assumption in there that we're not all nerds, because I think a lot of attorneys, I think we're all nerds. If you go home and talk about torts and you're not talking about the cakes, then I think you qualify. But the last person that we hired was an English major, so zero business background. And also, I just think the wonderful thing about attorneys is we all think that JD is so freaking cool that we could care less what anybody's undergrad is. So at least for me, at least with the hiring partners I work with, they could care less if you don't have a business background on your resume. All they care is you do good in law school and you're interested in the practice, right? I also personally don't think you need an MBA. If you want more insight on that, you can feel free to come talk to me or Dean Dickey, who has great advice on that. So last question for Candy is, other than the normal Utah bar, what other bar do you have to sit for to practice securities law in Utah? Anybody know? Trick question. None! I don't know where it's coming from. Way back there. Oh. Oh, Peter, great catch. All right. Okay, so I just want to make one final point. But that's to prove that you don't need any specialties to practice in my field. We're very non-specialized. The last point I want to make is that your grades do not define you. I just heard that grades came out last weekend, and I've talked with law students who say, man, I was so interested in transactional law, but I bombed my contracts class. Or I was interested in transactional law, but I did so good in Civ Pro, right? Your grades don't define you, and I mean that in a number of ways. But for me personally, I did great in civ procedure, and criminal law, and moot court, and kind of sucked at business law and a couple of drafting classes. So from my own example, I certainly do not want you to ever think that your grade is who you are, right? And the last point I want to make actually is that, I poked some fun at litigation in general, litigators in general, but you guys are going to hear from some amazing people. I've met these people at other events, and they're some of the best. And so just think of it in the generic sense, but I hope that my preaching here has converted some of you to transactional law, and I am actually going to have to take off early, but I do highly, highly request that you reach out to me. If you have questions about the practice, please shoot me an email, and I mean it. I think some of the best use of your time right now, if it's not studying, is reaching out to lawyers and trying to get their sense of what they do so that you can understand, so that you can answer that first question that I asked, what practice do I want to do? So my email is chardman@gilmorebell.com. I know you guys all know how to get on the interwebs and look stuff up, but please reach out if you have questions. Thank you.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. Thanks, Clay. Luckily, I was forewarned, and I brought Oreos, although I don't think I have enough for all of you, but please feel free to come up and grab some afterward, or we can pass them around. My name is Katie Lewis, and I work at the Salt Lake City Attorney's Office. I am a 2007 graduate, so I've been out for a little bit longer than Clay, but I'm also a transactional attorney. And so I'm actually going to talk to you about working at a big law firm, which is where I started, and working in government. And a lot of what I'll say, I think, mirrors what Clay said, because I think the advice is spot on. But the reason I brought Oreos is because I think that when you're in law school, it's a great time to think about what's in your core and what is it that drew you to law school. What is it that you think you want to do with this JD? Because there are so many options. And it's easy, I think, when you get into law school to be kind of distracted by the shiny things, the money or the big firm or the somebody else, got a Cali in criminal law. Oh my gosh, maybe I should do that. But really think about, who are you? Who's your core? And that's what these Oreos represent, is what is it that drives you, that wakes you up every day to get you into this building? And for me, when I was in law school, what I realized was that I didn't like the adversarial nature of litigation. I don't like fighting with people, and I don't like feeling like my every word is being questioned and then going to be used against me. And so transactional law, I realized early on, would be a good fit for me. But I also realized that I want to be in a place where it's collaborative and where I've got lots of people to talk to and I'm not lonely. I don't want to be a solo practitioner. And the other thing that I realized while I was in law school was that I want to be busy. I want lots of different projects. I want to have an expertise, but I don't want to be, for the next 5 years, working on one big transaction. So with that sort of core, I started working at Parsons, Bailey & Latimer, which is one of the oldest and biggest law firms in Salt Lake City. When I was there were about 90 attorneys, but they've grown quite a bit since then and have offices in other states. And I joined their real estate group and got extraordinary mentoring. I think that some of the real estate attorneys in that office are the best, the brightest, the highest integrity, and I really learned a lot about what it means to be a lawyer and what it means to be a lawyer with the highest integrity, that there's an easy way and there's a correct way, and sometimes it's hard to do the correct thing, but that's what those lawyers taught me at Parsons. But I was lonely, and I found that working at that firm in a transactional group, which is a smaller group, like Clay was talking about, Parsons does mainly litigation. They have some transactional environmental focuses, but a lot of times I was alone and I was drafting by myself, and that didn't suit my personality. And the billable hour for me, as a transactional lawyer at Parsons, was very difficult. It was an 1,850 hour per year requirement. And if you divide 1,850 by 52 weeks in the year, that's about 35 hours a week, which you think, oh, that's not so bad, right? But what happens if you go on a vacation? Whoops, then you're 35 hours behind. What happens if you have a couple slow weeks? Oh, shoot, now you're 120 hours behind. And it's really hard to make that up, especially as a transactional lawyer where you're not doing 12 hours a day of doc review or a 6-hour deposition. And so it felt like a place where I could never meet the expectations, or if I did, I was going outside of my area of expertise. So I got really lucky. One of our clients at Parsons was the town of Alta, and I was exposed to municipal law. And I got to go up to Alta, and they're a small town with big, big problems. Everybody wants to build. Everybody wants to take their water. Everybody wants to benefit from, a rezone or, making money up in a small community. And they had big transportation problems and HR problems. And I was suddenly their in-house counsel for all of those issues. And I realized, wait a minute, let me think about my core. What do I love? I love being busy. I love being exposed to a lot of different types of work. I like the transactional work, but I like talking to a lot of different people. So an opportunity came up at the Salt Lake City Attorney's Office to be a transactional lawyer to represent what at that time was their Community and Economic Development Department. And that department had 7 divisions under it: planning, engineering, economic development, building services, all the transactional work that I like to do, but in an in-house position in government. So I took the leap. I left Parsons after being there for 7 years, and instead of narrowing my practice, suddenly it grew. And now I'm doing contracts, but I'm also doing First Amendment work, because every sidewalk that you walk down is a traditional public forum. And what happens if somebody wants to put outdoor dining there? Whose First Amendment rights are affected by that? So things that I hadn't thought about for the past 7 years when I was at Parsons, suddenly I was thinking about on a daily basis. And working at the city attorney's office meets my job satisfaction core Oreo center, because I am constantly talking to my client. I know everything that my client does. It's not a slice of the pie, it's the entire pie that I'm advising on. So if they come and say, hey, we've got this housing project over here and they want a waiver of impact fees, I know we just did a waiver of impact fees over here and we need to be consistent. Whereas when I was at Parsons, I'd be doing maybe one housing transaction, but I didn't know what the 5 other ones were. So being in-house is very satisfying because I understand the entire world of what they're doing. The other thing that government work has provided a lot of satisfaction for me is the local impact that my work does. So did anyone see yesterday in the paper there was an article about whether Salt Lake City and Mill Creek are going to work out who has Brickyard? Anybody see that article? Okay, well, start reading the Trib, because every front page article is something that I or someone in my office is working on. And if it has to do with economic development, homelessness, redevelopment, planning, impact fees, billboards, I'm touching it. And how exciting is that, to read in the Trib and think, oh my gosh, that's just something that I talked to the city council about or the mayor about. Has anybody heard of the inland port? Anybody heard of the inland? You guys got to read the Trib. Has anybody heard of homeless problems down at the Leonardo or Operation Rio Grande? All right, great. Get an Oreo afterward. Those are things that I work on, and to have an impact on my community and to know that the legal advice that I'm giving is impacting and hopefully helping my neighbors and the people that I care about, because I live in Salt Lake City, has profound meaning to me. So in conclusion, I reiterate what Clay said, is please reach out to me. Please reach out to others in the Salt Lake City Attorney's Office. If you think you might be interested in HR or you might want to do litigation, you care very much about First Amendment issues, you love con law, let's talk, because there are ways that you can practice that maybe you haven't thought about. And the most important thing is, are you happy and are you satisfied in your career? And that's your core. That's the center of the Oreo. So I recommend that you all think long and hard about where that core is for you and follow that path, even if it might be non-traditional. Thank you. Get in touch. klewis@slcgov.com. My email is harder to find because we're not marketing. Our client is the city. But if you do want to get in touch, talk to Dean Dickey, and she can put you in touch with me. Thanks. Help yourself to an Oreo.
First of all, I didn't bring any candy. I didn't bring any cookies. So if you want to throw me out now, it's quite all right. It's not the first time I've been thrown out of a room or a courtroom, so it'll be okay. My name is Mark Flores. I'm here to talk to you about a couple of things. First one is I'm a criminal defense attorney. That's at least part of my practice. I want to talk to you a little bit about that. And then I'm also a solo practitioner. I've worked in a big firm, but spent most of my time in smaller firms and on my own, and talk to you a little bit about that. Although I got to say, Clay, I was impressed with the accuracy. Even with the technique, I may want to talk to you afterwards. So, first of all, what does criminal law consist of? Well, hanging out with criminals, or at least people accused of crimes. It is everything that you can think of. It is some of the most interesting and seedy and shocking stories that you could imagine, but it's also some of the most important work that's being done when it comes to things like mental health and drug addiction. And it is a business that requires you to have empathy, and who can look at your client and realize that their case, no matter how minor it may be compared to all the other cases you have, it's the most important thing going on for them. And it may be a case that it's going to matter what happens to them because it's going to affect the rest of their life. It may be a case that it matters what happens to them because it may affect the kind of mental health treatment they're going to get, or the kind of drug treatment they're going to get, and whether or not they're going to move on from that moment, or they're going to end up spending the rest of their life in prison or become a person we consider institutionalized because that's what they do. They spend their time in prison. And so what does criminal work consist of? It does consist of the practice of criminal law, understanding the statutes, understanding the consequences, the punishments that may be meted out towards your client. But really what it consists of is understanding people, understanding what their needs are at that moment, understanding that your job is to see them in this very difficult place and try and put them in a position that at the end of this trial, they're going to be able to move on and be productive. So, yes, please understand the Fourth Amendment. It's important because sometimes your client may have a lot of facts stacked against them, and that Fourth Amendment may be the only defense you have, or maybe the defense that gives you the kind of plea bargain you want. Yes, understand what the criminal statutes mean. Understand what the punishments are. But more importantly, understand what mental health court is. Understand what drug court is. Understand the different types of treatment agencies that are out there. Because sometimes the best deal you're going to get for your client is that you're going to convince the judge that instead of jail, they ought to be able to check into an inpatient treatment program. Understand those things that are out there. When it comes to one of the questions that they wanted us to talk about was, what are the personality traits of a criminal defense attorney? Well, one is you got to be empathetic. The other one is you got to be just a little bit disrespectful. Look, the judge is important. He or she is the most important person in that room. He or she will present themselves as being right all of the time. Secret is they're not. They're often wrong. How do you convince them that they're wrong? How do you convince your client that you're standing up for them when that judge is being wrong or unfair, or maybe you can see them leaning towards a punishment that's probably too severe for the situation you have? You got to be a little disrespectful. Means you got to push back. You've got to be less respectful of the power of the judge and recognize the most important part of your job at that moment is being zealous for your client. That doesn't mean that you do anything to embarrass yourself or embarrass the judge, but push back. So, it takes a little bit of being disrespectful. It also takes a whole lot of being respectful. I will tell you right now, the most important relationship that you're going to have as a criminal defense attorney is your relationship with the prosecutors. If you have a good relationship with prosecutors, you're going to get a better deal for your client. If you have a bad relationship with prosecutors, they're not going to want to talk to you, they're not going to want to listen to you. Understand that in criminal practice, you are dealing with that specific case with that specific prosecutor right now, but you're going to have probably over the course of your career 50 cases with that prosecutor. Make friends with them, right? So there's a part of this is being disrespectful, part of it is being very respectful. One of the things you never want to do is be an ass. It's tempting sometimes because you can get a little zealous for your client. It's tempting sometimes because you got a prosecutor who's being unreasonable or a judge who's being unreasonable. It can be tempting sometimes because you think maybe that's what you're supposed to be at that moment, is kind of fighting, right? Showing off for your client, pushing back. But again, you got to think not just about this client, but what's down the road for the rest of your clients too. One of the questions that they wanted us to talk about is, what does a typical week look like? You should imagine yourself being in every justice court in the county and in Utah County. If you're practicing in Salt Lake, in Utah County, Tooele County, Provo, Heber, you're going to be in all those justice courts. You're going to be in all those district courts. If you've got a thriving criminal law practice, you will be in court almost every day. You'll at least be in court 2 or 3 times a week. And sometimes you'll spend hours in court. And if you work it out right, maybe you've got 2 or 3 different cases in that court and you can put them all on the same day and save a little bit of time. But if you want to be in a courtroom and you want to argue law and you want to investigate cases and you want to feel like you're on the front lines, it's criminal practice. I worked in a big firm and there were a lot of really smart attorneys. And those attorneys used to brag about how they'd done 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 trials. I've lost track how many trials I've done. Because that's what that practice is. So if you want to be in a courtroom, be a criminal defense attorney. What do you spend most of your time doing? Some of it's research. Most of it is investigating the cases. Looking closely at the police reports, finding the discrepancies, because there will always be a discrepancy. Find the discrepancy between one report from one officer and another report from another officer. There will be discrepancies. Find discrepancies between the video they just gave you of the stop and what they put in their police report. Find discrepancies in what the police say they should have done and what they actually did. I had a case where a client was accused of rape. And he said that actually what happened was that they were out in the backyard dancing and they had taken their clothes off, and then they had gotten in an argument over an ex-girlfriend, and he got dressed and left. The police get called. They show up the next day. She calls in the morning. They show up the next day. And they don't mention this in the police report, that they found her clothes in the backyard. Or excuse me. They don't mention that in the police report they found her clothes down in the laundry room in a pile of dirty clothes. They also didn't mention that they picked up her clothes, took it out to the backyard, staged it on the grass to make it look like somebody had torn clothes off of her, and photographed it in place. I found that out through another witness who had seen her retrieve the clothes from the backyard and take it down into the laundry room. And when I asked the lead detective on the case, what do you know about this? His response to me was, well, I didn't take that photo, and that's not what I would have done, right? It's there if you look at it. The discrepancies are there. So what is it? Investigate your case. Know the facts better than the prosecutor. And you will know the facts better than the prosecutor because you have less, hopefully you have less cases than the prosecutor does. You're spending more time because it matters more to you and it matters more to your client. There's a personal relationship between you and your client that motivates you to want to spend more time looking at those police reports and investigating those cases. How does criminal work differ from other types of practices? Other than being in a courtroom a lot more, you're still going to write memos and motions. I think the bigger difference is the relationships you develop with the opposing side. When I practice civil litigation, sometimes your relationship with opposing counsel is antagonistic from day one and it never stops. Like I said before, though, you can't do that with a prosecutor, and a prosecutor can't do that with you. What I've always heard people who practice civil law comment is like, why do defense attorneys and prosecutors seem to get along so much better? Well, it's because we have to. So from that standpoint, it's actually a little more enjoyable kind of practice, right? It doesn't feel quite so adversarial, even though it is a very adversarial, it's still an adversarial form of practice. You have a chance to get to know the other prosecutors and develop relationships with them. One piece of advice I'd give you about criminal law is, again, not just understanding the drug court and understanding mental health court. Understand that there is a group of experienced criminal law attorneys out there that when you pass the bar and you say, I'm practicing today and I've got a question, they will be more than happy to answer those questions. UACDL is the Utah Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys. We have a website. We have a listserv that if you join, you have access to, that you can email any question you want, and you will get fantastic answers back from some of the most experienced attorneys. Use that. But also at the same time, when you walk into that courtroom for the first time, introduce yourself. Tell them who you are. Say you just started practicing. If you got questions, ask. They're going to help you. I'll help you. If you ever have a question, give me a call. I'm more than happy to, sit up there and talk and tell you what I know and don't know. But remember, there is a support system out there if you choose to practice criminal defense who want to see you succeed. Because when you succeed as a criminal defense attorney, then we succeed as a practice. And if we succeed as a practice, that means our Constitution is being honored just a little bit more. The ideas that we have in law school about fairness and justice and equality are being honored just a little bit more. Because if we're not the ones pushing back against the state and the federal government, no one else will. And if we don't push back, innocent people go to jail, or even guilty people get punished in ways they shouldn't get punished. Bad laws get passed. Bad practices happen. So we want to see you succeed. So if you choose to be a criminal defense attorney, don't hesitate to ask questions and ask for help. Be more than happy to help you. Solo practitioner or small practice. So I will tell you the three things that I didn't concern myself with that I wish I had as a small practitioner. One is recognize it's a business and you got to make money. That means you can't be afraid to charge your clients and you can't be afraid to expect to be paid for the work that you do. I always joke around that I'm happy to do pro bono work, but I want it to be the pro bono work that I choose, not that some client chooses for me. And my wife is here. She's going to talk to you later. She knows that I've been better at that at some days and worse at it at others. But it's a business. You got to collect your fees. It's also a business. You can't forget about taxes. If you were a solo practitioner, let's put it this way. If you own the firm and you're not an employee, you're going to pay taxes. You're going to pay employment taxes. You're going to pay income taxes. And you got to set money aside, because the worst position for you to be in is to have worked hard all year long and made some money only to turn around and find out you didn't save enough for taxes and you got to figure out where that comes from. So learn the business part of this. Learn that there are certain, you got to be an accountant. You have to be your own financial advisor. You got to be your own IT person. So those are things that I didn't think about when practicing law. You got to be your own marketing person. And that's gotten really, really tough lately. But there's information out there. And again, there are other attorneys out there who will talk to you about those things, who will give you advice about what to do and how to maybe market your firm and how maybe to market yourself. But those are certainly things that I didn't think about when I became a small practice attorney, and I'm still learning. One of the things that you find, and I will tell you this too, that nobody's going to tell you, is when you're a small attorney or in a small practice, you are going to spend more time billing sometimes than it feels like you're practicing. That may or may not be true, but it feels that way because you have to be your own billing department. But you got to get the bills out, because you don't get the bills out, nobody pays you. So again, QuickBooks is a great program. There are other programs out there. Learn that part of it. What else about a small practice? Well, small practice, you're going to practice different types of law, and don't be afraid to do that. I practice primarily in criminal law, but I also do personal injury. I do some general litigation. I do some transactional work. I'm a sports agent. If you're going to be a small practice, be prepared to do different types of work, because ultimately it's a business and you got to make money. And sometimes if you want to be a criminal defense attorney, you may not always get all that work you want. Or if you want to be a transactional attorney, you may not always get enough transactional work, and you've got to find out other things. Or somebody just comes to you and says, hey, I've got this problem and I'd like to hire you. Don't be afraid to take it. Again, there are going to be other people out there. I've turned down jobs that I regret now. I turned them down because I was like, man, I don't really practice that kind of law. I don't really know that kind of law. I mean, I get it. I understand the basics of it. And so I refer them to someone else. And it took me a long time to learn. I was like, why am I doing that? Why am I sending work away? I have friends. I have colleagues. There are people that you're going to law school with who understand that kind of work. And if you ask them, hey, here's what I need to do. This is what I've been hired to do. Can you give me some advice? They are more than happy to help you out. This legal community is small, and in many respects, it is kind. And people are willing to help you if you ask for that help. So as a small practitioner, be prepared to practice a wide variety of law, and don't be afraid of something just because you're not as familiar with it or it's something you hadn't thought about doing. Reach out to people who do that kind of work. They'll talk to you about it. They'll talk to you about it because they want to see you succeed too. And if they don't want to talk to you about it, put a little asterisk by that person's name. Just remember, you won't call them next time, and call the next person, because somebody else will help you. What else is about small practice that's... It's nice. You're your own boss. You pick your hours, But like every other legal practice, those hours are going to be dictated by what you got to get done. The only downside of a small practitioner is nobody gets you paid time off. So if you take time off, that means you're not making any money. And I think that's really kind of it. I think, am I enough time, or I don't want to go over, but I also don't want to go under. So thank you.
And also, so you would like me better than my husband, who's better at speaking than I am. But this kind of leads me into what I do, which is I am in-house counsel for StorageCraft, which is a software company in Draper. And the big difference between being in-house counsel and a solo practitioner is I have people who do all that stuff for me. I am an employee, and it is a sweet spot. Like to just describe it as the what could it be? Not the baby bear bed, but like the comfortable, cushy sofa of law practice. So I need to grab my notes, but please. feel free. You might need these at football games or somewhere else where someone needs to see what you're not concealing. I've got pens as well. So I suspect that many of you know, but if you don't, being in-house counsel means that I am an attorney for StorageCraft. I'm employed by StorageCraft, and StorageCraft is my client at all times. What I do for StorageCraft, I'm part of a 2-person legal team there. The general counsel of StorageCraft is my boss. I'm associate general counsel. Our company is just under 300 employees worldwide, so we don't have a lot of, the work gets divided up as it comes in, basically. We're not super specialized in our legal department. So typically for me, we kind of split the work. My typical work week would be working on licensing agreements for our software, working on service contracts for services my company might need, compliance issues with worldwide privacy regulations and other types of issues that we face with software and our cloud business. Before we had more of a robust HR department, I handled a lot of the HR issues that came up. So when I came to StorageCraft 7 years ago, I was basically it. So I found myself wearing that hat of having to address any HR issues that came up. When we face, if we have litigation that comes up for the company, in-house counsel generally manages that litigation, but we always have outside counsel that handles it. And then you kind of find yourself picking up every little pieces of things too for your company if you're in a small legal department. So like I handle our insurance applications because I can't get anyone else to do it. But I have other friends who are in-house in larger legal departments and they become quite specialized. So they'll be like the data privacy person, and that's all they have to worry about. Or they're the HR person and that's all they have to worry about. Or they're the licensing contract person. But that's it, and that can be good because you become really competent at that one core aspect of the job. But what I like about my job is when I go in for the day, I may have a plan of what I'm going to do that day, but anything can come up. Any issue can come up, and you find yourself doing that, addressing that problem for your company. So to talk to you a little bit about like kind of the pros and cons of being in-house counsel. The pros, definitely for me, when I first started doing it, I came from a litigation background and had litigated for about 11 years. So the biggest pro for me was walking in and no more billable hours. So that for like the first 2 weeks I sat around wondering if I should be, in fact I would go back to my office and write down what I did because it's so ingrained in you after a time period that you track all of your time. So that was the biggest pro for me, is to not have to track every second of my day. That can be, that's just part of practicing law. If you get out and work at a firm and you're billing clients, that will be what you're doing, and it's not the worst thing in the world, but it can, it can be a lot of pressure also. So that's a good thing. Another great aspect of being in-house is you only have one client, and that's your company. And you may have different pieces of that client, of your executive team that you're addressing, but you only have one client that you deal with, and you learn that business very well. The other thing that Mark talked about that is hard when you're a solo practitioner or even a partner in a firm is you're the employer and you're managing that business. I don't have to manage my business. I'm an employee. And so although I might have input or help with that, I don't have to worry about paychecks getting out or who's paying the rent or, dealing with that aspect of running the business. One of the things that I really enjoy about being in-house also is when you're practicing law at a firm, you deal with your client, and that's basically it. I have the opportunity to work with product management, work with marketing, work on their If they need something like trademarked, or I work with our HR department with their HR issues, or work with finance because they need to open a bank account in some foreign country. The work can be very diverse, and you can work with cross-functional groups, and that is something that I enjoy, and it keeps it from getting lonely. You know, you're not just stuck in your office, you're dealing with people all day long. Another great aspect of it is when you have to hire outside counsel, then you're the client, and you can, you know, go to your lawyer and tell them what you want to accomplish and what your issues are, and they're helping you. Another awesome thing about working just at, I think, a software company, but it is probably part of that, but also being in-house, is this is way as dressed up as I ever get. And so it's I think most of the companies that you work for are going to be less stringent or more casual than law firms. That could be changing, but some of the cons of being in-house are you only have one client, and that's your company, and you cannot fire that client, no matter how annoying they are. So if you get out and work in a law practice, especially if you litigate, or especially if you're a criminal defense attorney, you are going to want to fire some of your clients. And at some point, even if you don't give in to that urge, that case will be over. That's not the case when you're in-house counsel. Your fate is tied to the company. So, which it can be great because you're really invested and you want your company to do well. But for example, Storagecraft was acquired a few years ago by a capital venture firm, and that can be a lot of upheaval, and you don't know where you're going to land when that happens. So you don't have another book of clients that you can lean back on when that happens. So that can be a scary part of being in-house. The other thing is, while it can be lucrative to be an in-house attorney, and it's going to be different depending on what business you're with. It usually, I would say, you can make more money in private practice. And so I've talked to a lot of attorneys that have looked at going in-house and then said, oh, well, I can make so much more working for a firm. So you have to kind of decide what it is you're looking for. If you're looking at maybe going in-house, and decide, do I like the non-billable hours? Do I have to make a certain amount of money? What am I looking for in my work-life balance? Because for me, it's been a much more flexible work environment that I've enjoyed. I know that, if some of you are thinking, hey, that sounds pretty good, can I graduate from law school and go find a company I want to go work for? And the answer is a really big maybe. I mean, there's potential out there that a company would be hiring and looking for someone, or maybe willing to try someone straight out of law school. But I think the reality is a lot of companies, they're trying to reduce their costs of using outside counsel, and they're looking for someone who maybe has some experience in a certain area. A lot of people I know that have gotten in-house jobs have come to them through, they were a client of the firm they worked for, and they developed that personal relationship with them, and then decided to go in-house. I also think it will depend on what past life experience you bring to the table. So I think there are opportunities straight out of law school, probably more after you've been out a couple of years, for an in-house experience. I think the final kind of insight that I didn't understand when I became in-house is, yeah, your client is the company, but you have to deal with all the diverse personalities too, and I've talked to in-house lawyers who have gotten themselves into trouble because they get crosswise with one member of the executive team or something like that, and you don't realize that goes back to your fate being the fate of your company, and you want to make everyone at the company happy and not get crosswise with any of them. So that can be a challenge. But I think that's It.
Okay, we're done. I'm sure any of them would be happy to answer any questions you have, and I will also send out an email with contact information for all of them, so feel free to email them any questions you have. Thanks for coming.